The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Arcane Wonders, Game Toppers, special guests making me play stuff that they think I might not like, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board card and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes host special guest Joshua Acosta and do his evil bidding by reviewing Tokyo Metro from Jordan Draper Games. Then they look back at the reviews of Azul, Stained Glass of Sintra, and Architects of the West Kingdom in their Dukes quadruple take. And now, the Dukes of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Alex.
And Joshua.
Oh my goodness, Joshua. How did you get here? What's happening right now?
Well, I'm glad to join you guys. It took some time setting up, but it's just, I guess, being a supporter of the Dukes of Dice, it's just a privilege and an opportunity.
Well, Joshua, all good things take some time, is how I like to tell people, which is why it takes me a bunch of time to do stuff. What do you say, Alex?
Sean, I'm just thinking back to recent weeks, and I feel like there needs to be a moment of confessional. Normally, this would be the period of time for the Dukes of Diet, but I have sinned and let down the entire Dukes of Dice community by depriving them of our wonderful connection for a week. Sean Ramirez, are you okay with me telling the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I think so, but hold on.
Wait.
We weren't done with Joshua.
Oh, sorry. Keep all this in.
Everything's staying in. Everything's staying in, Alex.
Hi, Joshua. Thanks for supporting the show.
Hi, you're welcome. Now I'm kind of curious.
You should be curious. All listeners should be curious. It's a fantastic story.
You're blowing up his spot, Alex.
Now, wait. Are you okay with this, Sean?
Yeah.
I assure you this looks far worse for me than it does for you.
Yeah, I'm fine. But no, okay. Hi, Joshua. Thanks for being a Dukes of Dice patron. And we appreciate it.
And thanks to Baker Mitchell for naming our episode Trains, Pains, and Moral Stains.
Oh, did we not
with
do
an
any of
assist
that?
from the Name Father, I think. So thanks for that. We name all of our episodes on the Dukes of Dice Guild, Board Game Geek Guild number 2008.
Hold on. Let's back up. Let's just back up. Let's not step all over Joshua's spot here.
Go for it, Joshua. Tell people about who you are, your game tastes, life, experiences, all that, please.
Oh, sure. So I guess I tend to enjoy the heavier games on the board game spectrum. That's probably one of the reasons why we're going to be reviewing one of the games we're going to be talking about today. But So I'm a medical student here in Washington, D.C. I'm almost done. I have about a little less than 3 months to go, and then I'll be a full-fledged doctor. Hopefully I'll be starting some OBGYN residency pretty soon. But amidst all that, I find time to game whenever I can, and just trying to enjoy the heavier things in life, I guess. The dieting aside, though, I do promote healthy eating.
Oh, good.
However.
Good. That's another piece of. There's a lot of stuff going on separate from all this. Joshua, and for folks who don't know, you had introduced me previously to a heavy game, Indonesia.
That's right. Yeah.
At Dice Tower Con, you convinced me. You talked me into doing it. We had to physically move the table the game was set up on for that game because that room was
into the hallway.
Yeah, because it was about to be a werewolf room, and that was no bueno for that game. You got me to enjoy a Splotter game, so I had at least some faith that the pick that we would end up on, I would not completely hate. But we'll talk about that in a lot of depth later on.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Joshua, you taught me and Raquel Lisboa.
That's right, Dice Tower Con.
Yeah, that was many Dice Tower Cons ago, which has gone on to become one of Raquel's absolute favorite games. So
that's a win in my book. That is definitely top 5 for me.
It's super good.
Yeah.
I've yet to try that one yet.
We're happy to have you here. Glad we finally were able to make it work after all of the time that it took, which is really what I was getting at. Good job,
Yes.
Alex.
Yeah, no worries. Hey, let me break. Can I break? I'll break some other news before getting into this other great story.
Oh yeah.
I got a job. I'm now employed. I having not been employed for a number of months. That has changed. This week was my first week on the job at a place called Sapper Consulting, which basically does email marketing consulting, B2B stuff. Still in training. Don't fully know what I'm doing just yet, but excited and happy to finally have a place in the world and start having money coming back in instead of just going out. So that's the news with that.
Well, congrats.
Thanks.
Yes, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's a robust board game community at this office. I got hired through Matt Coons, who I worked with at Gray Fox and now works for Sapper as well. So yeah, and he's not the only one. There's another guy from Genius Games who moved on from there to this place. So there's a nice little weird board game niche community inside. So already have some folks I know. And in fact, at lunch today, played a little Gone Shown Clever. So
Nice.
Can't beat that.
Yeah. All right. The story.
Oh boy.
The story. Where do I begin? So Joshua, as you may have heard, Sean and I have been in a D&D campaign for more than a year now. How long has that been going on, Sean?
Yeah, at least a year and a half.
At least a year. For folks who don't know, we're running through, what is it? Tomb of Annihilation, I think is what it's called. Something like that. It's one of those types of broader campaigns. Anyway, we're in a group with Suzanne Sheldon, with Aaron and Lindsay from Boards Alive, and Sean's in the group as well. Raquel started in the group, but she did not last long in the group. She had other stuff to do. So
it was her anxiety.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's too bad. Oh well.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
Yeah. So I have a character. My character is Thok, who likes to rock. He's a half-orc bard. And Thok, over the course of this adventure, has befriended an NPC who was a crew member on a ship, Mopsy Buckets. Good old Mopsy Buckets. Mopsy is Thok's best friend in the whole wide world. They have a jam band together. Thok has Mopsy's back at all times. So it will surprise no listener of the Dukes of Dice to know that Sean has been trying to kill Mopsy.
Not just trying, but succeeding. I've now gotten him killed twice.
Yeah, in fairness, the only reason Mopsy is still alive in the campaign is because the DM kind of turned him into a real boy, into a real character that actually gets, health saving throws and things like that and can be revived. And if Mopsy were a real NPC, Mopsy would have been dead twice, once by a dragon, once by a crocodile. So I had taken Sean's various attacks on Mopsy very personally, but I hadn't really spoken up about it. I just sort of let the rage build up inside. And after our D&D session, the Monday before the recording of that episode, I sent a message out to the entire group that said, this video as a whole, but specifically this section. And it was a video by Matt Colville, who does fantastic work as a D&D guy, talking about players being wang rods, was the exact term. And it was not cool of me to do that. Sean was understandably upset. I hadn't had a chat with him in private about such a thing. And then I talked to Abby about this whole situation. Abby, my fiance. And Abby was like, okay, so let me get this straight. Your anxiety over a fake friend, or you're upset that a real friend of yours is trying to kill a fake friend of yours. And that put things in some amount of perspective. So apologies were quick to come, but offenses took a little bit of time to mend. It was tricky times in the duchy, and for no one's fault other than my own. So yeah, I think we had said on the episode that Sean was tied up with law firm stuff, which is kind of always true.
Kind of true.
But wasn't completely true to the duchy in this case. So Sean, I apologize for my Mopsy Buckets related anxiety. It's all good now. We're all fine. Everything's okay.
Everything's great.
But Josh, you're coming in on our makeup episode. So
Yeah, I see that. It's very heartwarming.
yeah. Oh, it's beautiful, really, how two people can come together after such a calamity. So
There was like a 3-day period where I was like ready to burn the Dukes of Dice to the ground. But keep in mind, full acknowledgement that my character was being a jerk, and by extension, I was being a jerk. There's absolutely no denying that. But yeah.
Sean's proposed solution in part was to have his character befriend Mopsy, and my solution in part was to Mopsy, who's recently lost a leg in a vicious crocodile attack.
Giant crocodile attack.
Oh my god.
Yeah, giant crocodile attack while trying to save me because Sean convinced him to try and save me. Was to have some sort of a mercy killing, but unclear if that would have really gone over so well. So yeah.
I need to point out that getting Mopsy killed twice was not it was not me directly attacking him. It was me convincing him to do things that were not in his best interest and trying to present it to the rest of the in-character group as, hey, I'm just trying to help out here. And Mopsy's energetic and enthusiastic and wants to be a team player.
Though there have been some direct Eldritch blasts aimed squarely at Mr. Buckets. So,
he gets in the way of me and my target, you know?
Yeah. So in any case, now you know the story of how the Mopsy Buckets nearly ended 5+ years of the Dukes of Dice.
So Matthew's remark to me was, wouldn't it be funny if it was the occasionally role-playing that wound up taking the Dukes of Dice down?
Yeah, the 5% or less of the show. Yeah, excellent. Wonderful. So that's my confessional for this week. That's our check-in. We should probably just talk about games at some point that aren't me almost ruining friendships. Let's start with Josh. What have you been playing, Josh?
So I'll start off with something a little bit lighter until I bring on the much heavier one. So I've been playing Snowdonia Deluxe Master Set. So this is a game that is designed by Tony Boydell, is published by NSK Games. It came out, I think, sometime in the middle of last year. So Snowdonia, the original version, it had been released with plenty of expansions over a number of years. And so this was Tony Boydell's sort of way to combine all of those expansions into one large box and publish it in one piece, and then go on to, as it turns out, publish another game that is sort of his reworking of the Snowdonia. But I digress. Snowdonia Deluxe Master Set in itself is this huge box. It's a like Gloomhaven size box, but its box size is misleading in terms of its weight. So it's really not that heavy of a game. It sort of reminds me of Russian railroads. So players are trying to work their way up to the top of Mount Snowdon, and they're doing so by digging up rubble that is lying between them and the top of the mountain. They start at the base, and on their way, as they clear rubble, they make train stations available that they can lay ownership to, and they can lay train tracks down by spending steel bars. In order to get steel bars, you have to spend steel to do that, to get the bars in the first place. And of course, it's a train game with the rails there, so players can get trains as well. These trains can give you certain abilities, and the game is kind of so it's nice because players can sort of rush to the top of the track in a way to time the game on their own, because the game ends once you build the last track to the top of Mount Snowdon. But the game also has an internal timer that ticks away at the end of every round. It can add to the timing of the game to sort of take away some time. But it's very enjoyable. I've been playing a little bit of the original Snowdonia online, but some more of the deluxe version in person. And in person, it's great because you can add in all these things from the expansions, like goats and a Yeti and the North Pole and all these ridiculous things. It's a lot of fun. I encourage anyone who's interested in it to, if you can get your hands on a copy, to try it, to definitely try it. But it's a very very large box. I was lucky enough to participate in the DC area's group buy, so I got it for close to half the price.
Nice.
But yeah, so if you can get your hands on it, definitely check it out. But it's quite an investment.
So I have not played Snowdonia, although I've seen it played a bunch of times, and I've just never. I mean, I've had the opportunities to play it, but for some reason, it just never happened. It's weird, but it's always sounded interesting.
Yeah, I think it checks a lot of boxes for me. It's like, I mean, even though the size of the box is ginormous, it's definitely a school night game, but it still gives me all the feels that I want out of maybe a much larger game.
Cool. Well, Alex, what about you? What have you been playing?
So I've been playing some stuff that we're considering reviewing. So I'm gonna be hesitant on how deeply I describe this. But one of the ones that I just played last night over at James Stegmeier's game night is Glen 2. So I have not played the original Glen. This is my first play of any of the Glen type of games. I don't really know thematically how to describe this. It basically, there's a track of tiles, and you are going to move forward and build a tile. You're in a line. It's sort of this. It's not really a rondelle, but it's sort of a track, a square track that goes around. And whoever is last in the order ends up being on turn. So that could result in someone taking multiple turns in a row. Could result in someone taking one giant turn and waiting for forever. Who knows? But you're going to move forward and you're going to take a tile. And those tiles can be things that produce resources, or things that allow you to trade in other resources for points, or things that build more castles and get you more people, or things that are people that let you get certain one-time effects. And the interesting thing about this game is there are 4 different scoring eras. So when the A stack runs out, that triggers a scoring era, and you'll compare your whiskey barrels, you'll compare the number of people you have in your castle, you'll compare the number of cards, and I think there's one other category. And whoever has the least of that sets how much the players who have more of that can score. So, for instance, if we were playing the game and Joshua had just 1 whiskey barrel, I had 4, and Sean had 5, I would score 3 points because I have 3 more than Joshua does. And the game scales in such a way where starting at a difference of 4, you get 5 points. So Sean would get 5 points for whiskey, and we keep going on for each of those categories. That scoring happens 4 times. And then at the end of the game, there's another scoring, which is based on the number of tiles you have. And what was really the cool thing for me about this game is there are a lot of these games that use that. Whoever's last in the order gets to move forward. And that mechanic can work really well in Tokaido or Parks, and sometimes people can be a little frustrated with it. What I like about it is it has this little balancing act in it, in that at the end of the game, you're going to count whoever has the fewest tiles taken and built into their kingdom. And if you have the fewest, anyone who has more than you loses 3 points per additional tile they have more than you. So at the end of our game last night, I think someone had 11 tiles and I had 17. Or they had 10 tiles and I had 17. So I lost 21 points. I lost the overall game by 5. So it made a big difference. It made a huge difference in that game. Really satisfying, smart way of selecting actions. Lots of different routes to victory. We were all using very different strategies. One that is another huge box of a game, even though the game itself is not particularly heavy. For some reason, it was reminiscent to me of Isle of Skye in the building, not in the auction or price setting, but in how you build out your own tableau and the theme, obviously. I really enjoyed it. It might be one that we'll review on a future episode. We're between this one and Paladins, and maybe some others that'll come up as candidates. But it's one that I enjoyed and would love to talk about in more depth. So that's Glen 2. Either of you guys played that one?
No, I haven't. I haven't even played the first one.
Yeah. In fact, I talked about it on the show a couple weeks ago, Alex.
Oh, did you?
I did.
Well, I wasn't actually listening.
I know.
Faithful listeners will remember that Sean did talk about this a couple weeks ago.
Faithful, actual people who listen to the show more than I do, more than one of the co-hosts. Fun times. Anyway, Sean, what have you been playing?
So I have played a ton of Barrage from Cranio Creations. That's the publisher. Designed by Tommaso Battista and Simone Luciani. Simone Luciani is a favorite designer of mine. He designed Zolkin amongst a bunch of other stuff. No, is that true? That's not true. Am I thinking of someone else? Who am I thinking of? Yeah, no, I am. Simone Luciani is one of the co-designers of Zolkin. Okay. Also like Lorenzo Il Magnifico, bunch of stuff. So Barrage is interesting. Barrage, I played this initially at 4 players with Matthew. Nope, not with Matthew. With Jared, Matt, and Eugene. And then the next week we played again. And then the next week we played again. So I've gotten 3 plays of this game in. And it's a pretty beefy game. Basically, it's kind of an alternate reality 1930s. Your different international companies that are building dams on these alpine rivers, trying to provide power to, I guess, different parts of Europe. And essentially, the main board are 3 rivers that are going downhill, and they kind of twist a bit, and they might flow from one lane to the next. And then there's different dam points. I'm not swearing, people. I'm just saying dams. Different dam points in the mountains, and then the hills, and then the plains. And it's a worker placement game where you're using your actions to basically build up your company's infrastructure throughout all of these rivers, with the ultimate goal of being able to pipe water through water that you've held reserved in your dam, pipe it through these conduits that then goes to your power station. And the more that you're able to do, the more power you're generating. At the end of every round, you're checking to see who has generated the most power, which is going to give you some end turn income, as well as some points for who's done the most, who's done second most, things like that. It reminds me in some ways of Brass. And I don't mean that mechanically necessarily, but the feel of it, where you're creating a type of network that other people can also use. So for example, in Barrage, when you're pumping water that's pooled up at your dam, you have to own the dam, or it has to be a neutral dam. But you can then use someone else's conduit that's attached to that little reservoir. But at the destination where you're pumping it to, your power station, has to be yours. And so it's interesting. There's a little bit of kind of drafting off what other people are doing. There's a bit of racing to use up water that's being used or being held in a neutral dam. But also, as you're pumping water through, like if I'm up in the mountains and I pump it through, it's going to flow down till it's going to reach another dam, or it's just going to flow off the board. But now maybe I've pumped water through, and I've done it in such a way that it feeds it into Joshua, your reservoir, or I could have fed it in a different way that maybe fed it into yours, Alex. And so you have to kind of be aware of that, but ultimately you're still trying to generate the most power. So you may not have a bunch of choice in terms of where it's going. This was a really good and interesting game. It uses, in addition to this worker placement mechanic, which is pretty standard, it's multiple action spots that have a variable number of workers and sometimes coins that you have to pay. You also have 2 other resources, these brown excavators and these gray, I think they're like cement mixers or something. And when you're building your buildings, you go to a worker placement spot. You all have your own building worker placement spots, but you go there and then you take the type of building that you're building. So there, like I said, there's the dams, there's also dam elevation, the power stations, and the reservoirs. And you take this little, we're calling them pool noodles. They're little like wedge shaped things, and you put them on this wheel. And it costs a certain amount of the brown and gray components, and you take those components and you put it on the wheel with it. So you're not actually spending them, you're locking them up for a time. And then you twist the wheel one spot, and then as you build new things, the wheel keeps twisting, and there's even action spots you can go to that will give you an additional spins of the wheel. And eventually, when that first thing comes back to the top, you can pull off that little pool noodle and get those excavators and cement mixers back to be used again for other stuff. Very cool, very interesting. This was something that we've enjoyed quite a bit, and there is a chance that this could be my game of 2019, surpassing Tank Duel, surpassing. Well, I don't know. Have I talked about Maracaibo yet on the show?
I'm not sure if you have.
I can't remember if I have. This and Maracaibo are competing for top game of 2019 now. It's really good. Joshua, have you played Barrage or had access to it?
Yeah, no, I haven't had access to it. I think that because of the rotations that I've been on and stuff, I just haven't. I've been sort of on a gaming hiatus, but it's definitely been on my radar.
Yeah, you should play it. You'd like it. Alex, don't play it.
Okay, no problem. Easy enough. So Joshua, you had talked about Snowdonia, and you said you were saving the heavier stuff. And I can see it on here, and I have a guess. Quite heavy, having played one of the PAX games. PAX Transhumanity? Oh boy.
PAX Transhumanity, yes. Which one did you play?
I played PAX Porphyriana.
Okay, all right, yeah. So PAX Transhumanity is in that sort of PAX line, the Sierra Madre PAX series. So that includes, Porphyriana and Premiere, and what else? I guess PAX Emancipation now, and PAX Renaissance. And so this is published by Sierra Madre Games / Ion Games Design, which I guess are now combined. And the designer is Matt Eklund. And usually for most of the other ones besides Premiere, Phil Eklund, Matt Eklund's dad, has been the designer. And so this is sort of Matt's, I guess, first design. I think he had one, like 10 years or so ago called Kriegbot or something. I don't know anything about it really, but so this was one that I was curious to try, but I just wanted to see what I was getting into with it. And like many PAX games, the rulebook was definitely something to parse, but once I spent quite a while understanding it, and really getting a feel for it, I jumped into a game of PAX Transhumanity over last weekend with some friends, and we actually ended up playing it like 3 times. Well, we played it twice together, and then I played it once solo, because I just wanted to make sure that I really got the rules down in my head. And it is surprisingly very fluid, like once you understand what's going on. So in this game, it's sort of it is looking into the future, and rather than seeing the future as this post-apocalyptic world, it is sort of like humankind's next renaissance. Like, what happens if there is no apocalypse and zombies and warfare and disease and famine? It's sort of the utopia of the world to come, and the story of how that takes place. And as a player, it is difficult to figure out how you're going to win this game, because in many PAX games, like let's say PAX Renaissance, for example, there are 4 possible win conditions. One of them might be activated at some point in the game. Actually, technically, there are 5 win conditions in Renaissance. The one being if none of the other ones take place, but people have to buy those victory conditions and then claim them on their turn. But more than one can be active at any given time. In this game, the game is going to end one way or another based on what the current victory condition is at any given time, and that victory condition will change based on what is called the splay. So there are 4 spheres in the game. There's I think it's the developed world, the developing world, cloud, or the cloud, and space. And so there are these spheres that players are able to commercialize industries within, and in doing that, it's sort of difficult to understand like how you're going to do these things. How can you commercialize? Well, in order to commercialize, you have to have syndicated the idea for that commercialization. In order to syndicate, you have to dedicate one of your agents on your finance board, and finances are very limited. You can go into debt very, very easily, and it's difficult to pull yourself out of that. But if you manage things well, you could actually be in debt and it not even affect you, because whenever you commercialize, you can get patents in those spheres, I guess, in those industries in a way. And the more ideas that have been commercialized within a different within each individual ideology or sphere, the more the patents are going to be worth. So if you've been able to manage things in such a way that you can continue commercializing these different ideas, you can have a whole bunch of patents that are worth a whole lot and just spend those and not really care too much about everything else that's going on. But there are, I think, about 6 different win conditions in this, or 6 different, what does the game call it? It's the current regime. So in this splay that I was talking about, whenever players put down or commercialize an idea, it is going to be one of 4 different colors, and the leading 3 colors in that splay are going to dictate what the current regime is, and that regime dictates what the scoring system of the game and what the game endpoint is going to be or could be. And it's very weird, but it's just solid. Like it's fluid once you get it, but it does take a little while to figure out how to do that. And there is a little bit of like blocking other people out of things and using other people's agents if you have been able to sort of position your companies in a way that other people's agents become your employees. It's a weird game. Not as weird as some packs can be, but this one is definitely one that I want to play a lot more of, because I think the theme really shines through, because I feel bright. Like, I don't know, I feel optimistic while playing it, and it's just this thing that I want to dig into a little bit more of and feel the story that the designer is trying to tell.
So Joshua, let me ask you, my recollection is that, and I've played PAX Renaissance and PAX Premier. My recollection was PAX Premier was a little bit more streamlined than PAX Renaissance.
Oh, a little is a huge understatement. Yes. Yeah, I would say so.
Where would you put this one on kind of that spectrum?
So, so if you think of PAX games in general, one of the things that you think about is this refilling market, this card market that sort of refills, and you can each turn you have usually a set number of things that you can purchase, or cards in a market that you have available to you to do things. In this game is different, because each time something is commercialized from the market, it does not refill. So that market becomes smaller and smaller unless someone expends a certain type of work to research to add more cards there. So it sort of lies outside of what you would expect from the typical market of a PAX game.
Okay.
So there's more thinking involved in, like, how do I do the thing that I want to do? Because I don't have... There's more that I didn't explain, because in order to commercialize, you have to... it has to be valid for you in order to do that. And there are only 3 things that make it valid, so you got to think about that. I think in terms of complexity, though, it's less opaque than PAX Renaissance. Because I've played PAX Renaissance now like 4 or 5 times, and I still have no idea what I'm doing. I really don't.
My only memory of PAX Renaissance is being at Dice Tower Con, and someone was in a game of that, and they were like, "Oh yeah, it'll be like 5-10 minutes," and it was literally an hour and a half from that point.
Yeah. It's a bear.
Ugh. Well, I've got something a little lighter to talk about next. I've been playing Shipwreck Arcana. Played that just last night. This is a really cool... I love how the game looks. Really cool-looking cooperative game. I have no idea what the story or theme of it is. It sort of has a tarot-ish kind of look to everything. Basically how it goes is there are a number of cards out there that will have qualities that you can place your tile here if this is true. You can place a tile here if that is true. Everyone has in front of them a set of tiles numbered 1 to 7 to kind of use as part of a logic guessing game, and then you will draw 2 tiles, and one of them you will place face up in front of everyone else, the other one of which is kind of secret to you. So other people won't know what that other tile is. Based on what you place, though, they can try and deduce. So, for instance, one of the spaces says, if one of your tiles is double or triple the other, you can place that tile here. Or if the difference between your two tiles is 1, you can place it here. Or if they are added together are less than a total value of 5, you can place this one here. If none of these cards apply, you must place it here and then move it to the card to the right. And then everyone, if you're playing with multiple people or the one person you're playing with, will make a guess. Will guess as to what the other tile you didn't play is. So if basically people will see what you placed and then try and make logical deductions on what you're likely to have. Sometimes they can narrow it down to 2 or 3 options. Sometimes that's just not really possible. You don't have to make a guess on your turn. If you don't make a guess, that's fine. But cards can do what's called fading. So certain cards have different fade limits, but basically, based on the token that's placed in front of them, if a certain amount of points of tokens is placed there, that card will fade. It becomes a player ability. It becomes an ability for the team to use to help out. But if no one made a guess on the turn when the card fades, it counts 2 points against you. So basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to get to 7 correct guesses of tiles in people's areas before whatever the difficulty setting you have is number of bad things happen to you. That's really the game. That's the entire game. It was fine. It has some interesting logical thinking. If that's your jam, there's certainly some things you'll really dig with Shipwreck Arcana. But at times for me as a player, especially playing tiles, there just isn't a lot of choice. You can try and figure out what someone meant to do based on their available choices and based on what they played, but sometimes there's literally nothing you can do. There's no choice. You're kind of forced to do this one thing and hope it goes okay for your team. It was fine. I enjoyed it. I love the look of the game. The look and components of the game are stunning. The game itself, it's not something I'm super hungry to necessarily go out and pick up, but I'm glad I tried it. So that's Shipwreck Arcana.
Yeah, I'm looking at this one right now, and the colors, like you said, are very, very beautiful.
It's a gorgeous game. It really is. But at least for me in that kind of a cooperative game, it's just kind of pure math and logic and logical thinking, and it's fine, but not enough decision points for me to find it super interesting. So yeah, that's Shipwreck Arcana.
Very cool. All right. Well, the last one I will talk about, I'm saving the best for last here. Oh boy. This is a heavy war game that is at this point, it's a classic. It's from 2005. Mark Herman, who is sort of the greatest CDG card-driven game designer, I think. This is Empire of the Sun, which is a grand strategy World War II War in the Pacific game. So it's the Allies, it's the Americans, and the English or the Commonwealth against the Japanese. And this is something that I've been playing solo. I've played it twice now solo. It's been set up in my office, and I'll play a half hour at lunch or a half hour at the end of the day. And over the course of, it took me about 3, maybe 4 weeks to get 2 plays of this in solo. The first play was very much just trying to kind of learn the ropes. And then the second play was really interesting because once I'd really had a good feel for it, it was kind of interesting there's a ton of tension in this game. And it's really interesting. So basically you're replaying the war in the Pacific from 1941 to 1945. And as the Japanese player, what you're trying to do is you're trying to drive down the US's political will to keep fighting the war. And you do that by conquering certain nations. So if you're able to take over New Guinea, take over Australia, take over Burma, Malaya, things like that, then it's going to start driving the US's political will down. And as the Americans, you're trying to either get to turn 12 with long-range bombers in range of Japan, or to basically conquer the home islands of Japan at some point before turn 12. But what's really interesting is that starting on turn 4, if the U.S. isn't taking back enough territory each turn, their political will drops by 1 every round. So you have these sort of grand strategic objectives that you're trying to do as the allied player, but also it's like, well, I've got to just take these little piddly islands because they're the only things I can really take this round. Otherwise, my political will is going to drop. Also, if you have like a U.S. Army unit of sufficient size that you lose in a battle, that can drop your political will. So you want to commit these large army forces because they're good at taking over stuff, but at the same time, a couple bad die rolls, and now you're in trouble. So it's really interesting. So the card-driven games basically are 2-use cards. There's usually an operation value, 1, 2, or 3, and then there's an event, and you're using it either for the event or for the operation value. And so there's a little bit of like deck management because sometimes these events, when you use them, it's going to remove that card from the game. So you have to kind of be aware of what you're doing there. This uses a really complex activate. I'm not going to go too much into the detail here, but this complex activation and supply system in order to have your HQs surrounding the map, order certain units to do things. And it's very much a reflection of the air power was what won the war, because all of your airplanes and your carrier units all project this zone of influence that's 2 hexes around it that can cut off supply lines, and you have to like position your the other side's air units to cut off or to neutralize the zones of influence. And it's really interesting. It's a very puzzly game. There is a solo mode where you have a bot. Its name is Erasmus, and it's very complicated, and I am never going to play with Erasmus. I was simply playing 2-handed, just playing, going back and forth from the Japanese to the Allies. And it was fun. I mean, it's interesting because there are, like the Japanese have these weather cards that can just cancel an entire Allied offensive. And as the American player, I know they have that weather card, but I have to play as if they don't. And so here I am planning this big offensive to take back Guadalcanal, knowing that it's just going to get canceled by the weather. So this was good. This was really good. I really enjoyed it. I took it to Wednesday night, which sounds crazy. Duke's Dice Wednesday night. Rory has blown me off twice now to play this. We were supposed to play classic Rory. We were supposed to play Sunday morning. The plan was to play like 4 or 5 hours Sunday morning. Put it in the game topper, not the game topper. Wow. They have a different game table that has a table topper. Not a table topper. Stop calling it a table topper. And then finish it Wednesday night. So he blew me off Sunday morning, and then he's like, "Oh, but don't worry, we'll play it Wednesday." And then he blew me off Wednesday, and so I asked if Matt wanted to play, and he's kind of war game curious, and so he said yes. And then Eugene didn't have like anything to go do, like because it was just kind of a weird mix at Empire that night. And so I'm like, well, I'm happy to run you through it. Like I'll get just as much enjoyment like teaching you guys how to play and kind of helping both of you figure it out. And it wasn't an ideal situation. And Eugene is much less war game curious than Matt. So I don't think he was thrilled with it. And in retrospect, there's a very small South Pacific scenario that uses its own little tiny map and is a much shorter game. And in retrospect, I think I should have just had us run through that. But I'm really enjoying it. This might wind up being a game that I only play solo. But I'm really enjoying having the space in the office where I can leave something set up, play something for half an hour, leave it, and then come back to it the next day or something.
Rory was too busy being frustrated with Jamie Stegmaier over availability of Wingspan in order to make it to.
You heard about that? Huh?
Oh, he called me. He called me twice, and we had a chat about it. I won't get into it, but two of my friends are maybe not happy with each other. I don't know. Anyway, that's very good. Well, that's Empire of the Sun, and that is what we played this week. No news this time around, so after the break, we'll hit the featured review. Sean, here at the Dukes of Dice, we always do things on time. You need a Valentine's Day episode? We'll get that to you about a week or two after Valentine's Day. You need a Halloween episode? I hope you like November Halloween episodes. So we tend to like running a little bit late, Sean. And good news, Game Toppers LLC has your back if you are a procrastinator like the Dukes of Dice are. Because late pledges for Game Toppers still open, Sean. Still open if you want to get on board with the ultimate gaming accessory.
Absolutely, Alex. So if you head on over to GameToppersLLC.com, you will find a link to Late Pledge Now. Do it now. Why should someone pick up a Game Topper, Alex?
Maybe you have a space like I do. A 2-bedroom, 1-bath, bottom floor of a townhouse. And look, I don't have room for an entire game room as much as I'd love to. I've taken over as much of this space as I can. But this table kind of has to stay a table. But it doesn't always have to be a table. If I want to, I can convert it into a lovely gaming table using a Game Topper. And when I'm done with it, there's room in the basement for everything to stow away nice and neat. And Abby doesn't have to get too much on my case for always taking up our entire living space with games.
So yeah, if you're interested in setting up something like that, getting a high-quality gaming experience, then head on over to GameToppersLLC.com.
Game Toppers, upgrading your gaming experience. Yes, I know, Rome wasn't built in a day. But you're still many, many days too late. Well, at least you would be for Foundations of Rome, the newest Kickstarter project from Arcane Wonders and designer Emerson Matsuuchi. That campaign is over, but you still have a chance to jump in and join if you want to be a builder that helps build up this great empire. Foundations of Rome is now available for late pledge. You can find that by going to the Kickstarter page and clicking on Late Pledge button up towards the top. That'll take you to Crowdox, where you can pledge your funds and still get a copy of this game that will not be in stores, a Kickstarter exclusive project, again, designed by Emerson Matsuuchi. So get in, don't delay, hop in now. Late pledge is still open for Foundations of Rome. That's Arcane Wonders, making strategic, competitive, and social games to enjoy with your friends. This week, we are being taken over by heavy game domination. This game takes you to Tokyo, where you are building a public transit line, riding on a public transit line, crashing the values of different public transit lines. It's all very confusing. But is the game itself confusing? Is the game itself any good? We'll tell you, it's Tokyo Metro.
All right, Tokyo Metro is designed by Jordan Draper, art by Jordan Draper, publisher, let me check. Jordan Draper Games. And in Tokyo Metro, players take on the role of private investors looking to build up stations across Tokyo, speculate on train lines, and comprise a shared network to benefit multiple parties. The core of the game is built around worker placement, which opens up 3 possibilities. You can walk and ride the trains across the Metro map in order to build new stations at advantageous locations for income when trains pass through. You can invest into the various train lines either by purchasing stock and becoming a shareholder in the line, or by speculating on a train line you don't own stock in order to potentially double your speculation. You can also build up your available actions by purchasing more action discs, more workers essentially, purchasing discarded action cards for personal use, or gaining tokens for specific use. There are these time tokens, and then also the bike tokens. So there's some route planning, investing, speculating, area control, and it's a real replication of the Tokyo area. According to the publisher here, Tokyo Metro brings a heavy economic twist to this ongoing Tokyo series that they've been doing. So let me ask you this first, Alex. What has been your experience with Jordan Draper Games, with the publisher?
None.
Okay.
Absolutely none.
Okay.
I've not played a game of his before.
I have played, and I backed on Kickstarter Import Export, which has kind of a Glory to Rome feel. And Joshua, I'm assuming you have a much more extensive background with Jordan Draper Games.
In fact, I do not. I do also own Import Export, but no, I
okay.
I don't.
Well, so let me ask you this, Joshua. So obviously this was your pick to review. Why did you want the Dukes to review Tokyo Metro?
All right, so Alex and I were having a discussion of what game would what game should we review, and I was thinking of what games I was expecting in the mail, and I was orchestrating a large trade with Board Game Co, and it was one of the ones coming in the mail, and I thought to myself, I definitely want to play this game again, and I think that it is one that Alex will not hate. I don't think that he will necessarily. I don't know if he will like it or not, but I don't think that he will hate it. So it's one that I want to play, and it'll give me excuses to play it on multiple occasions. So let's see what happens. And to be fair, since Alex and I did get to play Indonesia together, I did see the spark in his eye whenever he was, working out the route planning and everything like that. And there's a little bit of that in Tokyo Metro. So I figured I'd give it a go.
Have you played Antiquity from Splatter?
I have not played. I just got it, but no.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say if we really want to make Alex miserable, we would have played Antiquity. It would have been good. It would have been good. Anyway, okay. So Alex, what was your expectation going into this? Because had you ever heard of this?
So I've heard of Jordan Draper games mainly in the context of Kickstarter at shows will have Jordan Draper games at their booth. It's kind of one of their big Kickstarter success stories for indie games and indie game creators. And so I've heard about Jordan Draper games in that context. I honestly can't recall having seen one of their games or played one of their games. So I didn't have a lot of familiarity with the line per se. However, I do know Josh Acosta's taste in games. So knowing that, I was worried at whatever the choice would be, regardless of whether it was this particular game or any other game. But I did piece through suggestions. We talked about some things. There were some vetoes for availability and some discussion. But honestly, in looking at it, I was thinking, there's a chance I won't hate this. There's a chance I won't hate this. So my impression was not bad going into it, but it was also inherently concerned just based off of who had suggested the titles to play. So cautious, slight optimism, I guess would be the way I would phrase my mindset going into this one. Sean, what was your? So you've had some experience with Jordan Draper games. Did you have any expectations for this particular game?
So this was a game that our buddy Matt had backed on Kickstarter, and Matt and I have pretty similar tastes in games. He's my train daddy. Is the unfortunate? Did I tell that story?
No.
I didn't tell that story.
Maybe you did, and I wasn't paying attention.
Yeah, probably. So we were playing an 18XX, and he called me. Oh, I forget his son's name now. Shoot, he called me by his son's name, and I was like, "What?" I'm like, "Isn't that your son?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, that's weird." He's like, "Yeah, that was weird." I'm like, "I guess you're my train daddy now." So,
boy.
So yeah, he's train daddy. So yeah, I figured, this sounds interesting, and I appreciate the aesthetic that Jordan Draper brings to his games and to his game design. So yeah, I think I had pretty reasonable expectations. I tend to like economic games now. I used to hate them. And I tend to like train games, for lack of a better term. I expected there to be some route building, although I would say this isn't really route building. The routes are already there. It's kind of node building. You're building nodes to best capitalize on those pre-existing routes. So yeah, I think I had some pretty decent expectations for this game. Joshua, what about you? How was it this game came on your radar, and what were you expecting before you played it?
Oh boy. Okay, so here's a little bit of a story time. So I actually had played this game once before we decided we were going to review it, and that was back at PAX Unplugged in 2018. So it was at that time that I saw I was looking at, the games that were going to be available at PAX Unplugged, and I saw Tokyo Metro was on the list. But I also saw that another Tokyo game was on the list, and I had heard people talking about Tokyo Metro, and didn't really look anything up about it. I just said, you know what, if I get a chance, I'll check that out. Well, so I met some people there, and we're playing games, and it's about 1:00 in the morning, and we decide to play Brass. And so, okay, that's great. Let's play a game of Brass. So we finished. It's maybe 3:00 at this point, and we didn't really feel like going to bed. And someone said, you know what? I got Tokyo Metro today. Do you guys want to try that out? And I said, oh yeah, that sounds great. And he brings it down, and I say, that's not Tokyo Metro. Because I was thinking that he was bringing down Tokyo Highway, which is an entirely different game.
Yeah.
A much lighter game for that hour of the night. And but regardless, it was so we got it out, we played it, and stayed up quite late into the night, but it was a lot of fun, and so I really enjoyed it and wanted to dig into it a little more. But so my expectations are hard to gauge because I had no idea what I was getting into.
Okay, fair enough. So at this point, we would normally talk about the rulebook, and we're going to do that. But what I would say first, I'm gonna kind of tie in with the art components real quick. This is a very small box for what you're getting in the game. This is maybe I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 inches by like 4 inches by 4 inches, something like that. And there are a lot of sacrifices that are made to fit everything into this box. And I think one of those sacrifices is the rule book and how complete and in-depth that rule book could be.
Sean, you read my mind. How did you read my mind?
Oh, what did you guys think about the rule book? So like Joshua, you got taught the game, correct?
Right. I did get taught it, but in order to prepare for this review, I definitely had to reread it before getting in my future plays. Yeah.
Okay. And then I quote unquote got taught it as well, although it was a very rough teach from Matt, and that's not on Matt. That was more on the rule book. I've since read the rule book cover to cover multiple times. I've taught it 3 times now. In fact, I told Alex, when you get this, don't look at the rule book. We had a Skype session, a one-on-one Skype session. We had it set up. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach you to play just so once you start setting up and start playing it, you've at least got some sort of framework for it. I think it probably helped rather than go into it cold. But the rule book is not great. And it is the exact size in terms of length and width of the box, and it can't be too thick. And it's trying to basically fit a bunch of information about certain actions or multiple actions on one page. And so I think it became a slave to the size. And I think rulebook quality and just rule quality and clarity were sacrificed to fit into this tiny rulebook.
Sean, I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay.
It is 100% what happened in this is that they were going for a size of rulebook. They were going for a size of box. They were going for a size of all of this. And there are some ways aesthetically in which it was cool and it paid off. And I don't know if there are others in the series that this looks like, and there's a reason why they did it, Tiny Epic style. But no, it led to a bad rulebook. In my, I like you said, not good, not great. I'll be more blunt about it. Bad. I think bad for what it was trying to accomplish. There is a lot that's left out. There are a lot of examples that could have been made clear, that could have spelled things out. There are some corner cases and situations, and even setup isn't necessarily fully spelled out as best as it could be. And thank goodness you took the time to take me through this on a Skype call, because I then had to teach the game for my first play of this with some help from the rulebook. But there were a lot of unanswered questions and some rough spots of going through this. And for a game this complicated, I don't think it was a wise decision to have a rulebook this lackluster. I think it was a big fail. Now, one thing I will say for the rule set, Sean, is there's some degree of intuitiveness in that the way I thought things should work was how they ultimately did work in the cases where we were unsure and it wasn't spelled out by the rulebook. In looking up kind of clarifications later on BGG, they lined up with the way that you expected it to work, which I think is a positive for the game, but there's just too much gray area, and it didn't do a good job. It just didn't do a good job. I mean, part of it too, is that this is a bilingual game. It has everything in Japanese and English. The game itself is very friendly to play in both languages. They have player aids that are in both Japanese and English. But with a box size this small, with limited space already, I think they scrimped and saved and sacrificed, and I do not think it paid off with this game. So, big negative for me.
Joshua, what about you?
Yeah, so I thought about this a little bit, and I think I'm going to come out of this with a dissenting opinion, actually.
Ooh.
So the rulebook, I think I agree with the assessment that, you know, it is trying to pack a lot into a small place, but whenever I think of like who Jordan Draper is as a designer and the company and the games that he's built around his brand, I think that he and this is not giving him a pass. I think it actually, if you don't compare, you know, the rulebook to other rulebooks, I think it has its own merit, because I think he views games, or at least his expression of his design in games, as art. And so whenever I would be reading a section and I would have questions about a certain rule that was not answered by the sentences themselves, my answer would be in the example picture. So there would be pictures to supplement the description that give you the answer that you're looking for, or that you wanted out of the description that it didn't explicitly answer. And
Joshua, wait, I have a question. I want to jump in here. I know it's very rude, but that is me. When you go above 6,000 in income for a train, what do you do?
You flip the right, yeah,
and move it up the tracker. And how does that pay out?
So I think you're trying to catch me here if the rulebook doesn't say it, but it pays out. I think it's going to be whatever was at the. So if you look at those fractions that were at the top of the board for 6,000, it's going to be that plus whatever the marker ends up being.
Absolutely, and that's intuitive. It fits in with the system of the game, and it works as it should work, but it is not spelled out in the rulebook in any satisfying way.
Yeah, that is valid.
So it's stuff like that. Like there's I couldn't tell you the exact station, but there's two stations, for instance, that are on the same line. But you can buy a station that covers both. So, for instance, the train goes through J7 and J8 as an example. It's probably not exactly what it is, but we'll talk more about rules and how that plays out. But in that situation, is that train considered to have hit both of those spots, even though it's just one station? Well, intuitively, the answer is yes. And sure enough, the BGG clarification is yes, that is how it works. But not spelled out in the rulebook. I don't know.
I think that there's definitely a lot of things that the rulebook does not. It is not a satisfying rulebook. I'll definitely say that. But it is. I think that it has more merit than you're giving it credit for.
My problem is with a game this complicated, to not have a full-fledged rulebook for me with better examples, with better information spelled out. You're right. There's some things that if you look closely, you can understand how speculation works better. You can understand how investing works better. There are examples in there. But for my money, I just, And part of this may be, I don't know, Josh, you might be used to more to heavier games with worse rule books, because I've certainly found that there are a lot of heavy games that do a very bad job with the rules. It's part of my big thing with it, and maybe this does it better than most, but at least for my standards of how I want to learn a game and how I want access to information, it falls short of that.
Well, all right. So I think that I agree. It's hard to have a dissenting opinion because I do agree with everything that you're saying, and I think that I want to give him a pass because of I think that he was trying to be artistic with it, but there are way too many things that have been left out. I think you're right.
And we can talk about art, and I think we're about to talk about art and components here shortly. I agree with you that there's artistic merit in how this game looks, and there's artistic merit in having a consistent box size. And there's some things that the game does, and there's a marvel to it and a wonder to it. I don't know. For me, though, I think functionality has to come first for this kind of stuff. So anyway, but I understand where you're coming from. There is certainly a vision here that he seems to be trying to live up to. Anyway,
and if you go to his website, it's jordandrapergames.com.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look at all of the games, and there is, like I said, this certain aesthetic to them. And so I think I take your point, Joshua, being that his main, it wasn't his only goal to provide a clear and concise rulebook. He had other aspirations as well.
Sure.
Other aspirations that some people, like me, he didn't value that clear, detailed rulebook as much as some other designers may have.
Right.
So,
all right, art and components. I think this goes hand in hand in some ways with the last one. At least for me, it is remarkable to me just how much game is packed into this small box. My mind was blown seeing how much table space it takes up, how big it is, and how it kind of like clown car style it just gets completely packed together with stuff. To accomplish that, there were some sacrifices made, but I still want to stay on the positive side. I think there are things that are really well done. The resin buildings in this game are a really cool component, the stations that you build. The cards themselves are certainly of decent quality. The little wooden pieces are bright and colorful. The trains themselves that run up and down the lines have arrows on it that make the game easier to play and easier to see where a train's moving next. So that stuff went great. And I'll let you guys talk about positives for a bit first before I go into some of the negatives, or maybe someone else will jump in. But
so yeah, let's describe what all is in there. So the main board is not a board. It is a piece of cloth that is folded up, I don't know, probably like 6x8, folded up six times one way, 8 times another way to fit in the box, something like that. And it looks great. The board, it looks like a Metro map. And my understanding is this is the Tokyo Metro map, essentially. And there's an overlaid grid on it, which is how you're moving your pawn around, your little guy that goes around. And yeah, I like the big chunky cylinders that are the trains. Like, they feel good. They're the bright colors, the arrow's helpful. The cards are very interesting looking. So they're color coded. So certain types of actions have certain types of colors, but then there's also a pattern that goes along with them. Yeah, I mean, I think that the production in a vacuum is very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, going into that whole topic of sacrifices had to be made in order to fit this in the box, there are some pieces that are way too smaller than you would like them to be. Right?
Yeah.
Right. So, in the game, there are these very small wooden arrows that you use to track the prices of the company's share value for each of the train lines. It wasn't really a problem to me in my games, but I could see how that could definitely be an issue for some people. But I think overall, I really enjoy the way that this game looks. Along with the game, so one of the other things that Jordan Draper Games has available is called Currency Sakana. Maybe I'm pronouncing that last part, but Sakana, right? So it's rather than playing with the cardboard money that came with the game that you could punch out, it is this very satisfying metal money that looks exactly like the money that came with the game, but it itself, you can play games with just the money instead of just using Tokyo Metro, or you can play it with whatever other game. But that I really like to add into the game, and I always appreciate when a game can use a cloth map for can put one to good use.
Okay, all right, here we go. I have a long list of stuff for this one. That cloth map, it does look gorgeous on the table. And for the main train map and how things move, the fact that it has the little ridges and doesn't lay completely flat is okay. It sort of gets in the way sometimes. Sometimes it's unclear exactly what place, for instance, your person that you use to determine where you can build stations is. Sometimes that's a little unclear. For the most part, it's functional and looks cool on the table. The tracker cloth map is a disaster. Is an absolute disaster for me because it has those ridges. It doesn't lay flat. It's somewhat easy to bump, and if you bump it, stuff's going to fly everywhere because it doesn't lay flat. It's hard to put pieces exactly where you want them. Now, Sean, I have a guess as to how you solved such a problem with plexiglass.
Yep. Guess
what? I don't have plexiglass, and I'm not going to get plexiglass for a game. It's not going to happen. I'm not doing it. Make a functional game. And tracking incomes in this is so vital and so important to the game that I guess if something gets bumped and it's within $100 or $200, it's not a big deal. But it annoyed me constantly throughout my plays of this, having to move the little markers and having them possibly get bumped and having to deal with the ridges in the cloth map. It was bad. It was brutal for me.
Let me interrupt real quick.
Okay.
And just to kind of piggyback off that. So I think what made that a little bit harder too was the fact that the stock value tracker were ticks. It was ticks that you're trying to move it up in line rather than, so in a bunch of 18xx games, you're tracking the value of all these stocks and there are distinct squares or boxes that you're putting your pieces in. Now I think it was done this way so that it's just one nice linear, one straight line up and down so that you're not having to go, okay, we go over another column and now it's an additional value, this other column, whatever. I get why it looks better this way, but for practical reasons, it made things difficult. Again, there were a lot of times where it's like, okay, is it on this tick or is it on this tick? I don't know. And sometimes you can kind of math it out, go back to think about all the actions that have occurred. Sometimes you can't.
Yeah, I think oftentimes you can't because sometimes the bump comes from a start, for the train being started, and then someone invests in it, and you don't know at what level they invested in it. And you can sort of figure out how many stations it passed through and who owned what stock at what time, but It's not always straightforward. Let me get into another one. For these action cards, they live in different decks, specific different decks, mainly, and it's a smart thing to keep the balance of actions that are available at any given time at a proper level. They're ordered stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. All of that makes perfect sense to me. Why are all of the card backs identical for this game? Why wouldn't they just mark, this is the red-blue deck, this is the yellow-green deck, this is the orange-whatever deck? And the patterns are easy enough to distinguish between, but they're not night and day. It's not perfectly easy for me to see exactly whether this card belongs in this deck or that deck right offhand. And so it made setup and breakdown more tricky than it really needed to be. And in 2 of the games, the cards were improperly sorted, so one deck had more than the other, and then when the card came out, it'd be like, oh, well, that doesn't belong in this stack, it should be over in this stack, and then you had to sort that out. And it feels like it would have been, in fact, I know for a fact, from being in publishing, it is not hard to have some sort of marker on the back of those cards that would indicate what decks they belong to. It's a silly oversight to me. Did that bug anyone else, or am I crazy?
It didn't really bother me. So what Alex is referring to is there are 6 different action card rows or columns that you can you place your action discs, and in each of these, each of the 6 card decks is 2 different colors. So there are 12 different colors total, and in each of one of these decks, there's at least 1 or 2, maybe even more cards that are even 2 colors. So if the deck consists of 2 colors, let's say green and pink, some cards will be green, some cards will be pink, and then 1 or 2 cards will be half green, half pink. And so for me, it wasn't really a problem because I just looked at that card that had both colors on it and then threw those cards into that deck.
But why not just have it so when you have all the cards face down, you can just see on the back what deck this belongs to? What would that have cost the design? What would that have taken away to do that?
Well, I mean, during gameplay, you don't really need to know what cards are in a deck because the card deck is going to be above the column that of cards that are already available.
I agree with you.
Right.
That during the game, it's not important. The issue is for me is during the game, it's set up. And the fact that some of these colors are close enough together that it can still get confusing. And I think your system of looking at the double-colored cards and sorting based off of that is fine. It just, to me, was an oversight that again, it could have made setup just a little bit easier, and it would not have cost them anything more. It would not have taken up additional component space. I don't know. And maybe I'm nitpicking and getting annoyed over something that isn't an issue, which often happens. But for me, it annoyed me. What annoyed me also was the dominations of money. The money itself is small and pretty fiddly, and the difference between, say, the 1,000 yen and the 5,000 yen bills was not a large enough of a discrepancy for me. You can tell if you put them side by side, but at least when you're grabbing stuff from a pile, there's a chance you can mix that up. Is it a huge deal? No. Was it a problem most of the time? No. But because of the small size of components, there's a lot of fiddliness that comes into play that makes the game, for me, a little less fun to play. That's my rant. I don't actually have much else beyond that I can think of. Sean, am I missing anything?
No, I don't think so. I think for me, it was pretty much just the stock value tracker that was the big hindrance. I think I'd agree with you with some of your nitpicks, but that was the one that really stood out. And yeah, we fixed it with plexiglass. We have that available at Empire, and I have it here at the house. But that's not for everyone.
Now, and I want to go back to praise. I think there's some things that are really cool. I like the look of the little tokens for a loan or a speed token or a bike. The placement spots are intuitive, and the iconography mostly works pretty well. There was some confusion in our games over the receive a loan and pay off a loan space, which looks very similar. There's one with an up arrow to the side of it, and there's one with the down arrow to the other side of it, or something along those lines. So there were some other weird little things in there, but there's some great stuff. Again, the stations are nice, the discs are nice. I like the colors. I like the use of the gold, and the game looks great on the table for the most part. It's just functionally it gets in the way. It just gets in the way for me. I don't know. Yeah. So art and components, gameplay. Who wants to start off our discussion about gameplay?
So since I didn't quite do a full rules overview, let me see if I can just provide a little bit of context here. So the object of the game is to have the highest stock portfolio and cash on hand, basically at the end of the game. And you are purchasing stocks. There are 3 stocks per company the first stock is the least expensive and will ultimately be the most valuable. And then the second stock is more expensive and less valuable. Third stock even more so for both of those. There's also an element where you can speculate on a stock, if a particular train line, if you don't own stock of that, where you're basically you're locking up money of yours for the remainder of the game with the option to basically double it if that particular stock does well. And in doing so, you're going to tank the stock equal to the amount that you're getting paid out, which is then going to pay out less for the other people who actually own the stock. Now, the main way that you are increasing stock value and also generating income for yourself is by building stations on the Tokyo Metro map. And as trains get started, either by someone starting up or buying the initial stock and then that train starts running, or by taking a start action, which runs trains without anyone actually owning stock in it yet. Once those trains pass through, they move five stops per turn. If they move through your station and you own stock in that train, you're going to get nothing personally, but the stock value is going to go up 500 yen. On the flip side, if it goes through your station and you don't own stock in the company, the value of the stocks can go up 200, and then you are also going to get paid out 200 yen. So that's sort of the underlying goal, purpose of the game, what you're trying to accomplish. So everything else is basically in service of that. Fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so what do you guys think about the gameplay?
So I think so. You mentioned about if you own the stock, you're going to get more value out of it if you have a station on that train's line than if you don't own a stock. You're just going to get some money during the game. And so what that amounts to is whenever you are playing the game and you are building out all these stations, if you are doing well, such that the train companies in which you've invested are getting higher and higher stock value, it's more likely that you actually are pretty broke. And so I actually found that quite enjoyable, that sort of tug of war between actually having money during the game and that end game point situation. And I found that at least in the games that I've played, the people who were less sheepish about going into debt by taking loans were the ones who actually came out on top and didn't care too much about making money during the game in order to do things without going into debt. Because whenever you go into debt in this game, you're going to get 1,000 yen, but you'll have to pay it back 1,500 yen during the game, or at the end of the game if you haven't paid it back during the game. And like Alex said, there's only a couple spots where you could pay back a loan even if you wanted to. So I actually like that a lot, where you're doing that tug of war, and but otherwise I found it to be a little bit, and fiddly for me is saying something, because one of my favorite games is Roads and Boats. And Roads and Boats, you can't get much more fiddly than Roads and Boats. And so what so when you're looking at the board, you're trying to parse the game state. It's challenging to see what it's not that challenging, but at a glance, it's difficult to see how your train stations are going to benefit in the immediate future because of what trains might be eventually coming to hit those stations for you, and whether or not those trains are even on the board yet, whether or not they're even running, and it's not intuitive in the least bit whether or not, or if a train company, while it's on the board, will be running the next time it would reach your station. Because when these stations, or when a train is just started and someone doesn't actually own a stock in the train company, once it gets back, so it's going to run its line, it's going to get to the end, it'll turn around, and then it'll go back to the beginning of its line. If someone owns a stock in that train line, it will start up again and it'll keep going. But if someone doesn't own that, it is just going to stop. It'll come off the board, and maybe it'll come back on if someone restarts it or if someone buys a stock in it. And that is not intuitive at all whenever you're just looking at the board. And so there's, I mean, none of this really bothered me exceptionally, but in a game where, you know, little bits of income matter, and the value that you accrue over the game really matters once you get to the end of the game. It would be nice to have some of these things a little bit more spelled out just by looking at the board, without having to really think through things, I guess. But otherwise, I really enjoyed it.
I have some things to say. So, yeah, I'll get into some gameplay specifics because I agree in large part with some of the points both of you made. But my story starts at Jamie Stegmeier's game night, where I subjected the folks to this game.
You're welcome, Jamie's
Woof.
group.
Well, the way I'm phrasing that is actually okay. I'll get into it. My second play of this, I played with Henry, who's in the gaming group, who works at Pieces. Really enthusiastic. Loved this game. One of his favorites in recent memory for him. He really dug this game. And we needed a third, and we ended up playing with Dave. Dave is no stranger to heavier games. He brings Root all the time. He loves playing Root. And it didn't seem like this would be necessarily out of his wheelhouse. And so we played a 3-player game, and it was basically a battle between Henry and myself, and I ended up nipping him by a few hundred yen, which is a theme in this game. At least I found in my plays surprisingly close games in the ones that I've played. But Dave, I could see over the course of the game, was getting increasingly frustrated. And I saw a version of myself from maybe 3-4 years ago, how I would have been playing this game. Because the interplay between speculation and investing is such a key fundamental point to this game and how it plays out, that if there isn't a very good understanding of how those two systems work, it can be a big problem. And it led to him having a bad time because, sure enough, his most valuable train line, we both speculated, I think 2,000 yen in, or it might have been 1,000 yen each. And it dragged his most valuable line, the one he was kind of banking on, down to nothing. And it felt to him like that happened with only, like, with one action, you drained how much value out of my train line? You vampire? And I think that kind of interplay is pretty standard in 18xx games. But it isn't a standard thing. And I stepped back in that moment and I said, you are absolutely right. Like, the feeling you are having, this is a game where you've known you're not going to win for a couple of rounds, where it looks like people are kind of ganging up on you or taking a big bite of you out of you at your expense with little effort and kind of using knowledge of the game rules of the games against you. And yeah, sure enough, that was the experience. He didn't have a good time. And in truth, like, if you know the game, yeah, you just, okay, I had to take this action to take out a loan. I had to be set up. I had to have the available disc. You didn't take any speed tokens to block me from speculating in your line. But those are nuances of the game that if I had been in my first play, I wouldn't have known that was necessarily going to be a problem. People in my very first game of this, I was the only one, and I speculated once. I was the only one to speculate. And that's usually not a winning formula in this game. I think most people will have speculated once or twice in a winning game of this. It may not fully be true, but it's certainly a big path to victory and a big way you can bank money at the end and also, put a drag on other people. So that's story one. Story two is I played this game 3 times. And certainly with some heavier games and games of this weight, I might have in the past just played once and been like, that's good enough. I'm going to get away with that. It's fine. I know where I'm at. And this one had me interested enough to play it more times, partly because the games themselves ended up being compelling and close. I played a 2-player game of this as my very, very last play, and that 2-player play of this was decided by 200 yen. It was 16,100 to 15,900 at the end of the game. Remarkably close. And all 3 games I've played of this have had a relatively close finish and some intrigue. And the opaqueness of it makes it so you can't totally know if you're going to win or how far ahead you are. There's some things this game does that are really, really good and really satisfying. And it also does some of the things in heavier games that I absolutely hate. That the rules of this game make it so that a first time player playing up against more experienced folks, I think, will have almost no chance. Almost no chance. So I actually have some really good things to say about this game. I think the worker placement stuff, how that works in the game, is really satisfying. The balance of when do you get more discs, the balance of trying to earn income to have some sort of liquid asset. Because the loan spaces, even if you would be willing to take them, aren't always available to take. The balance between that and investing at the right time, and when do I hop in and get the second shares of this stock? When do I speculate? When do I set myself up for speed tokens? When do I get bike tokens to be more maneuverable and bounce around? And so there's a lot of intriguing stuff and good decisions in this game. And there's also some stuff about it that is the level of unfriendliness that I don't like in games. So I'm torn on this one. I think, again, a different Alex, the Alex who first started the Dukes of Dice, would have a ranting, angry opinion of this game. And I only have a ranting, but not particularly that angry personal experience opinion of the game. So I don't know what to do with that, because I feel like I'm letting folks down if I'm not very angry for having played this game. And at the end of the day, I wasn't. So,
well, let me ask you, Alex. So you keep referring to this as a heavier game.
Yes.
Do you? Okay. All right. Fair enough. No follow-up question. even taking out my 18xx and wargaming from the equation in terms of weight of games. I mean, so looking at BGG, it's rated a 3.16, which is squarely medium. So I don't know. I didn't think it was a particularly heavy game. I think it's certainly opaque, but I want to call it heavy.
And maybe that's the description, I guess. It is mechanically not particularly hard. It's a worker placement game.
Sure.
With actions that are pretty clean and pretty easy to spell out. There's the bidding system. There's nothing in here that's mechanically super new or hard to grok or hard to get. It's fairly simple. You have a disc, you place a disc. Mm-hmm. If you want to get a discount, place it on this space and then place it on that space in a later time. That was another quibble with the rulebook was, do discount discs carry out between rounds? I don't think they do, based on my reading. But anyway, you're not wrong, Sean. The core mechanics of this are not hard. And honestly, that was my experience with the game, and part of why I really enjoyed what's that game from in Indonesia. Indonesia, to me, was not a mechanically complicated game, but the opaqueness of the scoring and knowing the interplay of the systems and what to do when and all of that make it, for me, complicated. And maybe opaque's the better word, but that's maybe heaviness really isn't. But yeah, I hope I'm articulating well where my standpoint is on the heft of the game.
And I would say that Indonesia is heavy, and BGG gives it a 3.98.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I would certainly heavier than this one.
Yes,
yes, without a doubt.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know. Interesting. And some of it's length of play, although that's not always the factor. For instance, I think Matainai is in some ways heavier than this game. So I don't know. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway.
So going back, Joshua, to what you were saying about the tug of war as a player, trying to generate money, but also trying to generate value in stocks that you own. I really like that too. And I think you can't be afraid to take loans. There are certain games that loans are really, really bad. And there's other games that sometimes the more you take loans, the more likely you are to win because you've got more money to do stuff with. And if you know how the system works, you could really benefit from that. What I really liked was that this game subverted my expectations. It subverted my expectations in terms of a train game, because in some ways it doesn't feel like a lot of different train games out there, and I think that's because you're not really building the routes. The routes are there, and so that was interesting to me, and I liked that. And then even the stocks, the stock system is weird. It's a weird system, and at first I was like, that's not what I'm used to. But as I thought about it, I'm like, okay, this is very different. And I really liked it. And even the way that it pays out, I thought was kind of clever. So basically on the stock payout tracker, there are two values listed. There's an initial value slash and another value. And actually there's a third value, which is the combined amount of those two. Is that right? Yeah, I think that's right. And so if you are the sole shareholder, and because you've only purchased one stock, because you can only ever own one stock in a company, which was also kind of different, then you're going to get the full amount and you're done. However, if you own a share and Alex, you own the second share, then I'm going to get paid out the first number, which is like the 2/3 or something like that. And then Alex, you get paid out the second number. And then if Joshua, you own the third share, so instead I get paid out the first number of the pair, then the stock goes down by that amount, and then it pays out the first second to this new lowered amount, which is kind of weird. Overall, it was super strange and super different, and I really appreciated that. So I was expecting this to be one thing, and it was something completely different, which I found pretty refreshing. And I really did. I played this in two very different ways. One game, we started relatively few lines, and it was very methodical, very tactical. And then there was another game of it where we started everything like pretty early on, like all the trains were up and running, and it was this chaotic mess, and it was a different kind of enjoyable. So I liked both ways of playing. And I appreciated, this didn't feel like another game that I've played, but with this twist. It felt like its own game, which I don't feel like I get to see much anymore. So I appreciated that.
I agree with everything that you said. And one of the things I really like about the game is how, again, I think it just plays into this concept of artistic and minimalist, that there were a lot of things that you expect from a game with a much larger board and a lot more pieces that are around that just somehow find their way into the mechanics of this game, such that, like, you know, in a larger game, you would hope to be able to mitigate certain things that happen to you, or that you would like to happen. And in this game, that is something that you can do. One of the things that you're able to do is to take one of the action cards into your personal supply, and now that is your action. Once it goes in the discard, you can take that, and now you can alone use that action where someone else can't. And you know, so the bidding system at the beginning of every round is a blind bidding system, but if you can choose to sacrifice one of your turns or one of your actions the previous round to have a benefit, sort of a head start in that blind bidding system. And so there are a lot of like little nuances in the actions of this game that make me feel like I'm playing a bigger game than what actually comes in this box. And I think that the size of the box just really is misleading in terms of the amount of gameplay that you can really get out of this box. And like you said, Sean, that your games have been played out different, and they were each a different kind of enjoyable. I think that this game has so much to it that even though every game starts out the exact same, that there's absolutely, like, if you play a 3-player game, all of the 1 cards are going to, because there's 3 1 cards in each deck, all of those are going to be out. So in every 3-player game that you play, it is going to be the exact same at the beginning, but it can play totally different. And so I think that this game has a lot to offer. And so I like that about the gameplay. That's no matter how many times I've played this, it's felt different every time.
Yeah. And I think too, the cascading cards adds to that, the cascading action cards, because basically you're having the bottommost row of cards get discarded, everything cascades down, new cards replace it. And so you have some idea what's going to be available next round, because you can see, depending on the player count, a certain number of rows, but you don't know what cards are going to flip. And so maybe you know that, this loan card is going to fall off. I really need to take a loan, but I really need to do this first. Well, hopefully a loan card will become available next round. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And I appreciated that. I liked that you have so many different things you're trying to do. There's jockeying for turn order. You want to do that because maybe you want first dibs on a particular action card in the next round. Also because maybe you're trying to fight for different stops to be the first person to play stations, because the stops are exclusive. You can't have multiple people that have multiple stations on a particular stop. So that created a certain dynamism to the game, and just the unexpectedness of what actions are going to be available. I thought was pretty interesting, and made you think twice, because you could just kind of say, okay, I know I'm going to do this turn, I'm going to do this, and this. And then of course you can be screwed up by what your opponents are doing. I also like, there's a little nuance with the action spaces. Like there might be one particular action that costs 1 disc and maybe $100, or let me check that. One action that costs 1 disc and like $400, and then you can do the same action for 2 discs but $100. And so you're trading off the number of action you can do for less money, for example. So yeah, there is quite a lot going on here with this game.
Well, and there's also, the diversity in how you build a station, right? Not just how many discs you commit, but sometimes, hey, I want to sacrifice this speed token to build a station. That oftentimes in games I've played was a big competitive part of things, where everyone was kind of scrambling to be first in turn order so they could take the one space that let them turn in their bicycle and turn that into a highly valued station. Which we'll talk about in theme about some of that, but
real quick. So just to explain that, anytime you're building a station, you're going to pay whatever is listed on the action card. So 200, 300, whatever, but you're multiplying that times the number of stops that basically would go through that station. So they can get pretty expensive if it's one of the 3 stop ones. And these particular ones, for some reason, you can turn in a speed token or a bicycle token that you've acquired previously to just build it for free, essentially, without any sort of multiplier.
Sean, I have some rules confusion or a question that comes up from you saying that.
Oh, okay.
To my recollection on the board, there are only spaces with up to a maximum of 2 that you'd have to pay.
No, there's 3s.
Yeah, there are quite. I think several 3s. Several.
Oh boy.
Yeah,
look at a map of this.
Yeah, they're joined by the gray bars.
Right, and I guess the way we played this, and perhaps it was very incorrect, is one of those was a station someone could build, and the other one was a station someone else could build, and they touched different ones. So the station on the left one dealt with the one on the left and the one in the middle, and the one on the right dealt with the one in the middle and the right. There's several of those.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, but my understanding
is your understanding of the rules perhaps different for some reason.
My understanding is that because basically it's the gray outline around the stops that connect it all, and makes that one so valuable.
Yeah. So each of these joint station stops on the map has its own name. So it could be the Otemachi stop, or the Hibiya or the Jinza stop, and those are joined by these thick gray bars, and that's what makes it more expensive. If there's 2 circles there, it's going to be double. If there's 3, it's going to be triple.
Well, congrats to me. I've played it fundamentally wrong every time. Great.
I was wondering how you had so much money when you were describing you speculated 1,000 yen.
Well, that mainly came from taking a loan and then immediately speculating.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where that came from. That makes more sense to me. And in some ways, the way we played it wasn't terrible because you were only getting the value of the 2 connected ones, if that makes sense. Like if you built on one of the sides of that and someone would have to build on the other side of that, but you still have to pay the double cost. So you don't get, for instance, if it was like a blue, a green, and a gray went through that one area, and then a yellow and a red went through the other one, you don't get the yellow and the red, you just get the blue, green, and the gray.
Sure.
Does that make any sense
Sure.
as how I'm describing it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a variant because it was perfectly functional, but
the ducal variant of Tokyo Metro.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd recommend it or not. And that's weird. See, for instance, I'm looking at another picture someone took of it, and I see 2 stations on 2 different points there. And I'm looking at another one, and I see someone built a station on just the gray section onto the left and not to the right. Are you both sure? Are you sure you're not the ones who are wrong?
I'm pretty sure, and I think this is what I think it is. I think that there was probably a decision to create a faithful representation of the Tokyo Metro that may not have been the best for this kind of question.
So this is one of the situations that I was talking about before in the rulebook, where the sentences don't tell you everything and you have to look at the graphic. So if you look at the graphic...
But even the graphic for me is unclear, right? Because there's a gray bar that usually a station will live in, and then there's another gray bar that a station will live in as part of that same collective, right?
Well, I'm talking about in the rulebook, if you look at the station action, it shows you a graphic showing the 1 station, the 2 station, and the 3 station, and how much you would pay to build at the 3 station.
Oh. All right. Well, that one's on me. Play the ducal variant if you'd like.
I'm pretty sure I taught it that way.
You may have. It's possible.
So there are quite a few situations in the game that you could that the money could that you could mess up the money system of the game, and this is one of them. Another one is whenever you start a line for one of the train companies, the money that you spent to start that line actually adds to their value, right? So that's something that
you don't spend any money at all. I believe it says
yeah. So you don't spend
you mean
money.
Invest?
But whenever you start a station, the card will say like plus 200 or something like that.
Yes.
And that money gets added to the train line that you start.
Yes.
And so that's something that you could forget. Another thing, you can ride trains in this game. If you own the stock in the company, you ride it for free. But if you don't, you have to pay 100 yen, and that 100 yen gets added to that train's value. So there's definitely ways to mess up the system of the game.
I knew that, and we didn't do that in the last game.
I mean, when it comes down to it, it's probably not a huge deal.
Yeah.
It's only 100, but it is something.
No, our last game, Train Daddy had like 16,000 yen, and then I was next with like 9,000. So that would not have made a difference. It was, and I'm curious. He was just aggressively buying stocks throughout the game, and I feel like that's my fault and the other players' faults for getting tunnel vision and not buying enough stocks to. I mean, we watch him and we're all commenting like, "Oh, this guy's buying more and more stocks," and that's on us. That's just we're just a bunch of dummies.
Well, because you can buy as much stock as you want, but you can only speculate twice.
Right.
And you want to get those first stocks, because if you don't, you are really shut out unless you speculate a whole heck of a lot.
Right. And I will say we were constantly forgetting to ride the trains. We'd constantly have to like go back and, oh, I meant to do this. And part of that, I was kind of going to save this for final thoughts, but part of that was the last phase of a round where you're basically moving the trains. So trains move 5 spaces unless they have time tokens, and they'll move an additional one. And you're trying to do this as quickly as possible, especially if you have a ton of the trains running, because this can get kind of fiddly because you're making sure it's running the right route. Sometimes some of the colors you may screw things up and have a train jump routes when it's not supposed to. You got to watch out for that. But then you're trying to quickly do the payouts or do the stock increases, and it can take a while, especially the first couple times. It took us a while, and having to remember, so wait, what happens if I have a stock and who has this stock? And the last several times though, it was pretty quick. And so I think you get caught up in just trying to track that and get that done quickly, and you forget to ride the rail. But I will say that the fiddliness of the stock track was a hindrance for me in doing that. If a game is fiddly, I don't know. It needs to have an easier way of keeping track of minute detail, and the folds and the creases and the mat made that difficult. So, oh well.
I think I'm pretty tapped out on gameplay.
Yep.
On this at this point. So, quickly talk about theme.
Sure.
So I can't tell you why, because this is as potentially aggravating of a theme as something like Food Chain Magnate, right? There's no reason I should like this theme more than the Food Chain Magnate one, which has disconnects, and this has. How are you building a whole train station with a bicycle?
Yeah, it's weird.
How are you doing that? You cannot do that. It doesn't make any sense. None of this game thematically really makes any sense to me.
Oh, I'd say that's the one. That's the one thing.
That's the only thing to you that makes no sense.
Yeah. What else do you have a problem with?
It's a public train system.
Oh, hold on a second.
Oh boy.
So I don't know too much about this, but I do know a little bit, and that's that in Tokyo, the Metro, so the Tokyo Metro Company is actually a privately owned enterprise.
Oh, withdrawn. Dang it.
Yeah, and it is funded by the government, but it is privately owned.
Okay, but wait. But are the individual lines competing with each other?
I don't know everything, but I do know that it is privately owned.
I doubt that. I strongly doubt that. But here's the thing. I may be strongly doubting that and be wrong. So I'm only going to so much of an extent strongly doubt it. But I will tell you, anyone I played this with was baffled at the theme, and I'm baffled at the theme, but it may actually make some degree of sense. I will tell you, despite being baffled by it, there wasn't anything that to me got in the way of the gameplay of this. The bike makes sense in that you can move more when you have the bike. It makes sense. It adds to your movement, whether you take a movement action or move during the movement phase. That fits, even though the fact that a bike could be as valuable as hard-earned money makes little sense. I don't know. Thematically, the game makes no sense to me, and it doesn't actually matter. It doesn't actually throw me off as much as I thought it might, or as it might typically. So, anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm on the Wikipedia page right now. So yeah, let us know what you think, Joshua. Let's see if I can find anything here.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, you're right. There are definitely some thematic disconnects, right? So you have this character, this little running guy who is on the board, and wherever you move him, as long as he's touching one of the circles of a station, you can build a station there. But that same guy, as long as he rides the metro, wherever he ends up, if he ends up at a station or at a stop that doesn't have a station, that same guy can build a station there. So you have this guy who's just riding around on the metro and just building stations. Not terribly realistic, but that it really didn't bother me at all. I didn't really see how this game worked thematically, other than the fact that it is a fairly real representation of the Tokyo Metro system until I learned that, at least in some capacity that Sean's about to enlighten us on, I guess, that the Tokyo Metro company and system is independently owned. But so theme for me, again, I love roads and boats. I am a fan of, just train games where, your trains are literally little cubes. I don't really care too much. It didn't bother me. I thought it was thematic enough, but that's about all I got.
Okay. So it looks like there are basically two companies, but then there's some other, there could be more. Tokyo Metro and Toei trains form completely separate networks. Prepaid rail passes can freely interchange between the two networks, as well as other rail companies in the area, but fares are assessed separately for legs on each of these systems, and regular ticket holders must purchase a second ticket or a special transfer ticket to change from a Toei line to a Tokyo Metro line and vice versa. So I'm going to say, yeah, that works.
No. What?
Yeah, there's multiple companies.
Each individual train line?
Yes.
No.
Yes, they're different networks.
There's two different total networks, but it's not every single, they're not 18 companies.
No, not 18.
Okay. But
it's, I don't know.
It's just weird.
You're weird.
I mean, but it's about as thematic as is one single person buying up a whole bunch of different train companies in an 18xx game, and someone else there's all these tycoons, and I mean maybe if you go back into the 1800s, maybe there was some super rich guys who were doing things like that, but it's not out of the realm of possibility when you put things into the light of an 18xx game.
Sean, you had an O moment?
So, yeah, it looks like, so it does talk about the different lines and who owns them. And it's very possible, because this goes back to 1927 was the initial underground. But I think really this is more 1941 and forward. I think it's very possible that the various lines were owned by different corporations, which makes sense, because if the government is allowing corporations to do this, they've got to decide, well, I want to get people from this particular district to this particular district. I don't care about, this group over here. Maybe it's promoting their own businesses. Maybe it's, who knows? Why not, Alex?
Yeah, and
have an open mind.
And then if you take into consideration the fact that the government does fund these individual companies, maybe they're subsidized in a way that, I started this really fantastic bicycling company, and the government is subsidizing my building of a station because I did that. I don't know.
Okay, Alex, here's the best analogy I have. Do you remember Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
I do.
Do you remember what the underlying motivation to that movie was?
I do. It was the cable car on the highway system. Yes, I'm familiar.
Exactly. Somehow that explains everything. Just go with that.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right. Guild thoughts. I'm very tired now by all of this. Matthew S. says, I found the choices made to make Tokyo Metro fit in such a small box greatly increased fiddliness in the physical sense and made an otherwise interesting game less fun to play. I agree with this comment wholeheartedly.
And then Evan says, this hits on a lot of marks for me. I love the tension in the action selection. I like that you can purchase personal worker placement spots. I love the heavy degree of interaction, and I like the speculation and how you can undercut other people's investments. But there are some negatives too. First, the game overstays its welcome at the full 5-player count. Second, the thematic tie-in of getting rid of a bike or speed token to build a station for free makes 0 sense. The rulebook is an utter mess, and there are a lot of edge cases that aren't well explained. Draper went for a very minimalist design here, which he employs across his other games as well, and frankly, this design ethos doesn't serve the game well when it comes to the rules. Finally, Jordan Draper went for form over function with the cloth board. It's simply very hard to play with that board, and it mars the play experience. You simply have to get plexiglass to make it easier to play, and that shouldn't have been a sacrifice in order to get the game into such a small form factor. It's a shame, really, as it is otherwise a very fine game. Despite my critiques, it scratches a bit of the 18xx itch, but also appeals to the Eurogamer in me, and would probably rank in my personal top 50 if I track that sort of thing. A 5 on the Ducal scale.
Very good. Well, we're at that point. Final thoughts. I feel like, although typically I tend to go last, I feel like I should go last here again, just because it's the most suspenseful.
That's fine. I can go first on this one, and I am very much looking forward to see what you're thinking on this. So, for me, I think I'm, so it's definitely not a 6 for me. So is it a contender for the top 10? I think there are too many other great games in my collection and games that I've played that I think hit that mark for me. So I can't exactly call it a 6, but all right. So if I take out the idea of a top 10, it is very high up there for me, but I wouldn't call it a 6, I don't think. And so for me, I'm struggling between a 4 and a 5. And so 4 is a good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. And 5 is a great game, will rarely turn down a play of it. And so 4 is not saying a lot for me because for belongs in the duchy, everything to me belongs in the duchy because I have quite an extensive collection, and I've gotten rid of probably 10 games in the past like several years. So for me, I'm just going on whether or not I would want to turn down a play of this, or if I think that it's just okay and I'll play it on occasion. And I think that this game still has a lot in it for me to explore. One thing that we didn't touch on in this game is a component of Jordan Draper's Tokyo series, which is right now 6 games in the Tokyo series, and I think will eventually be either 9 or 12 games. And this game can integrate with Tokyo Jiro Hanbaiki, which, if you look in the rulebook, is called Tokyo Drinks. And so it's a way to add onto this game a sort of expansion such that not only are you placing stations at the different stops, you're also placing these drink tokens or vending machines, I guess. You are, you're setting up vending machines and people are buying from them, and you're getting money that way each time that a train would go through it. And so I think because it has so much more to explore in it yet, and because the games are different every time, or can be, I think that this game falls squarely on a 5 for me. A great game, will rarely turn down a play of it.
So it's interesting, Joshua, when you were mentioning the drinks, it started kind of reminding me of Bus.
Yeah.
Which I wasn't particularly crazy about Bus. I would definitely play this over Bus, and there's some similarities, although quite a few differences here. So I'm between a 4 and a 5 as well. Like you said, a 4 is a good game worth playing, just all the time belongs in the duchy. 5 is a great game, will rarely turn down a play of it. And what Evan said too about how it kind of scratches a lighter 18xx itch, and I think, if I'm interpreting him correctly, I mean, it doesn't feel like an 18x game, but it satisfies some of the cravings that are associated with wanting to play that. It certainly can be mean. It certainly can be cutthroat. And I think that I would have given this a 5 if this had been a more traditional big box game that made ease of play more of a priority. And maybe that's not fair. And looking at Jordan Draper's line, looking at his aesthetic, looking at what he's trying to do, that may not be fair. That may not be fair to him. But from my experience, it makes it harder to play. It makes it harder to teach. I mean, I think now that I have a decent grasp on the rule book, that might be less of a factor. But everyone that I've taught this to or played it with has kind of been affected by the choices made with with the box size and the components and things like that. So I think this could have been a 5, but I think I'm gonna have to ding it to make it a 4. It's something I want to play. It's something I want to play more of. Something I want to explore more, and I certainly enjoy it. So good game, worth playing. Just all the time, belongs in the duchy. Matt, keep it in the collection. If you're going to get rid of it, let me know first.
Oh, this game, Josh. This game you made me play.
You're not going to give it a 2.
There's no way he unleashes.
Do you want to make score predictions before I have a score? I have my score locked in my head.
Yeah, you're going to give it a 3. It's going to be a 3.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I say that you hit it on. Yeah, it's going to be a 4.
Okay. All right. The scores are locked in, and I will tell you, one of you is correct.
Surprise.
So it's not higher than a 4. It's not lower than a 3. So oddly enough, I'm going to start this off by talking about what I don't like. And it's, I think the rule book is unclear and does the game a disservice. The components make this a really fiddly experience. The box size, while charming and making it take up less space and gorgeous looking and has it be a nice part of the collection, got in the way of this game at so many points. I'm not going to put plexiglass on this. I'm sorry. It's just not my thing. The theme to me doesn't click or make sense, even though apparently it actually does. And so there's parts of it that don't, and there's parts of it that I guess maybe kind of do or could be justified, but it doesn't get in the way in a huge way for me. This is a game that I don't know who I'm going to really play it with. There aren't a ton. I'm certainly not going to play this with Abby. There's not a prayer this is coming out with Abby. But even beyond that, I just don't know how many times I'm going to want to break this out. That being said, for all of those negatives, and it's not a small list, this game is engaging. It's tight. There are some really fun things going on with how tight it is, the different strategies, how things need to shift, how it all ends up working together. And for my money, it's a game that works my brain in a cool way. Do I have the most fun with it? No, it's hard for me to come away from that experience and say, "Oh, I really enjoyed this." But in the right 2-player experience, I guess I have had a ton of fun with this sometimes. So I'm of two different minds, right? The small box is a bad thing for the components and a great thing for the look of the game and the chance for it to stay in the collection. On one hand, it has some really unique and cool mechanics that factor into the game, and the shifting strategies are really nice and work well. And I mean, separate from that, though, it's an opaque game that is, harder to get new players to come to the table, and that's not something I buy into. It's not something I tend to like and seek out in my games. All of that mixed up stuff ultimately settles on a 4. Joshua, you were right. There's enough here that's really good and innovative and interesting, and a ton of game in such a small package that I intend to keep this. And maybe this will go down to a 3 on the double take. It's certainly possible, but it's one of these games that there's a reason I played this 3 times before the review when I could have played it fewer. It plays perfectly fine at 2, and it plays great at 3. I don't think I'd want to play it at 4. We didn't really talk about player count, but yeah, that's where I fall. Probably higher than anyone might have predicted coming into this, but Sean, you're not wrong in that it is not a very hard game mechanically. It's the complexity is in the score is it's just opaque at times to see how the different moving parts work. But that's also some of the beauty of the game. This fully fledged network and trains kind of coming from nothing. So I don't know. That's where I'm at on Tokyo Metro. A lot of negatives and enough positives to keep it at a 4.
Well, I'm surprised. It's good. Good for you, Alex.
Yeah. Hey, I'm really glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was not a terrible suggestion, Joshua. I think you probably could have definitely picked worse. So
I could have.
Yeah, for as much grief as I've given you, it actually turned out okay. And Sean, I will tell you, had I played this 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, there's a chance this score is a lot lower. But yeah, the truth is, I can handle a heavier game these days. We all grow in different ways. I play heavier games, and Sean starts exclusively playing war games. So, oh yeah, sure.
And 18xx.
Yep.
And some LCGs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of Magic Arena.
And also games that we review for the podcast from time to time.
And that too. Yeah, that too. All right, well, that's going to do it for the Duke's review of Tokyo Metro. A 5 from Joshua, and then a pair of 4s from me and Alex.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double Take.
All right, this week we have for you a Duke's Quadruple Take. First one up, episode 195, Fly Me to the Moon, where 3 was a company on this episode, Sean, because it was you, me, and at the time, Abby, my girlfriend, and now currently Abby, my fiance, and coming this October, Abby, my wife, reviewed Azul Stained Glass of Sintra. And Sean, we were all fairly high on this one, mostly. I gave this one a high 4. I said I don't need to own both Azul and Sintra, but if I didn't have them in my collection and had to buy one, I would buy Sintra over base Azul. There was just more going on there, and I enjoyed it more for that reason. Sean, you gave this just barely a 4. You didn't feel a need to purchase Sintra, but you were happy to have access to it. And Abby ended up giving this one a 5. She enjoyed the flow of this. She thought it was a nice twist on the Azul concept, and just dug the game and enjoyed playing it. Sean, have you played Sintra since?
I have not. And I think if I recall, I had basically said, I think I'd rather play Sintra than base Azul. But it wasn't worth the effort to me to get rid of base Azul in order to pick up Sintra. But it's there at Empire, and if I want to play it, I can play it. But I haven't wanted to play it. And I think it's great. I think it's fine. Well, that's kind of contradictory, but it's somewhere between great and fine. Probably closer to fine, but it's a very good entry level.
I have played this once or twice since the review, and I will say to some degree it has been overshadowed for me by Summer Pavilion. I enjoyed Summer Pavilion a little bit more than I enjoyed this, but I don't think any of the Azuls are necessarily so far in front of the other that. Again, I have Azul, I can see it right here, that I need to scramble to go out to get Summer Pavilion, even though knowing Abby's taste in games and knowing how much she loves Azul, she's likely to really enjoy Summer Pavilion as well. So, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So, Sean, did you give her a score? Did you move it down to a 3, or is it the same spot? Yeah.
No, I'm keeping it. It's still a 4. I mean, it's a good game. Yeah. What I would say is I have played base Azul here at the house several times in the last year. And had I owned Sintra, those probably would have been plays of Sintra. So
okay,
I'll give it hypothetical. Yes, I've played it since.
Oh wait, hey, I gotta give a score. It's still a 4. It's just not a high 4.
So I have not played either of the 2 games today in the Duke's Quadruple Take, but I have Alex, your discussion last week with Daniel Justin King, the Game Boy Geek. He with about Azul Summer Pavilion that got me interested, and I'm definitely interested in Stained Glass of Sintra, but I've only ever played base Azul, and I actually played it just this past week with my wife, and so yeah, I don't have really thoughts on this, but I'm sure it would probably rank somewhere around a 4 for me.
Cool. Sylvain Lacroix says, I haven't played that one as much as the original, but I think it is a nice little game. Takes the familiarity of Azul and simply does something different enough. I think I prefer this one to plain Azul, a high 3 on the scale. Next up, episode 196, Fog Attacks of the West King Dan, where Dan joined us and we reviewed Architects of the West Kingdom. I don't think he was in there for the review necessarily, though, if I'm remembering. I don't remember. Anyway, I gave this one a high 5. I said a satisfying experience on almost all levels, very few quibbles. Would not have surprised me if I had ultimately given this one a 6. Sean, you gave this one a 3. You enjoyed everything it did, but the worker placement with the twist wasn't quite enough for you. Resource gathering, turning things into buildings, wasn't necessarily interesting enough for you. You thought it was a good jumping off point for another game to do something more interesting. So, speaking of that, Sean, have you played this one since, and have you played Paladins at all?
I have not played Paladins. And no, I haven't played this one since. This one, I remember enjoying it slightly more than what you just read would suggest, but I've had zero desire to play it. I think it's good, and like I said, I thought it was interesting, but
Sean, I think Paladins is going to be the cure for you.
Okay.
I don't know if it does enough for you to love it, but and again, this is one that we may review soon, but it does more, and the systems interlock in a really cool, interesting way, at least for me, and I think there's a good chance you'll like this one better than Architects, because it has some systems that are similar-ish at its core,
yeah.
but I think it's, as you mentioned, a good jumping-off point for a different game. Yeah, that one might be the game. I don't know. I have played Architects since, by the way, and for some reason, I thought I was lower on this when I reviewed it, and to see me raving about it, I do really enjoy the game, actually. The roping mechanic, the thematic nature of it, the presentation, all of it are really good. And having played Paladins, I might be more inclined to break out Paladins before Architects, though I think both are worthy, good games. So I'll keep my score at a 5. I don't see any reason to necessarily drop it, because I would still describe it as great rather than good. But I think I've dampened on the excitement a little bit. I'm glad I didn't give it a 6 at the time. So, and Sean, I'm assuming you're still at a 3?
Yeah, it's still a 3.
Okay. Sylvain Lacroix, also the only one to chime in on this one. He said, this one impressed me last year. A clever worker placement game with a lot more interaction than we usually see. Doesn't hit the table as much, but it's a great, innovative game. Gives the game a ducal 5. So the guild, the one person on the guild more in line with me than with you, at least on that one. So that'll do it for the Duke's quadruple take. On Azul Stained Glass of Sintra, it stays at a 4 for me and stays at a hypothetical 4 for Sean. And for Architects of the West Kingdom, it stays right where it is, though slightly less enthusiastic from me and about the same from Sean. Before we wrap things up, though, the best of the rest. The names we didn't pick for this episode 220. First up, Jimmy DM90, Conductors of the East Empire. A good combination of a bunch of themes going on, referencing trains and train games, referencing the format of the name of Architects of the West Kingdom, and East Empire referencing, I think, Sintra within that title, though it could also reference, in theory, Japan and Tokyo Metro. So, nice name.
Yeah, so the name father gave us Stations of the Cross. I didn't actually chime in on the guild for the reading of the rest of them.
Sean, you knew this one. I didn't know this one, actually, either.
Yeah, so Stations of the Cross are Catholic.
Ash Wednesday, yesterday.
Yeah. So that ties in. Also, the stations of Tokyo Metro, and then you're building a cathedral, aren't you, in Architects of the West Kingdom?
Yeah, you are. That is a part of the thing. Yep, for sure.
Yeah. And then somebody who is who is that? Joshua.
See, here's the thing, Sean. I was hoping you were going to read that most recent one and then make him sing.
Oh, well, yeah. Who wants to sing this? Not it.
There's only one person who can sing a title. Everyone knows this.
That's right.
And I know this song, so I think I can mostly sing this in tune. Azula, Quadteca, ooh, I wanna play ya, then review ya. The Architects a year later. Let's hop on the Metro. I just wanna play games about Tokyo. Some trains go fast and others go real slow. Walk less and bike more when playing Tokyo.
Nice falsetto. Good job.
Yeah, thanks.
Amazing.
That's a song I learned at a very young age because the Muppets covered it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well.
Anyway.
Congrats.
So, nice job, Josh.
Yes. Way to go. All right, Don Gilstrap.
My favorite guild member of all time.
Your favorite guild member suggested medieval Moorish Metro.
That was a runner-up, I think, for Josh, right? For you?
Yeah, anytime you put in alliteration, you got me. So, good job, Don. Yeah, so finally, for Dustin Dowdle, he had building panes. And so this would refer to Azul Stained Glass of Sintra, the panes of glass building things in Architects of the West Kingdom, and I'm going to guess that it refers to the painfulness that was expected out of Alex for this week's review.
There was some painfulness, but it ultimately, there was also some pleasure in there. So I'm not going to go further with that concept.
Huh. Yeah,
Anyway.
That's good. That was getting a little weird.
Yeah, no doubt. So, all right. Well, thanks to everyone who hopped on the guild. If you want to throw your name in the hat, hop on the guild on the Monday before, basically, is it the day the episode? No, it's a week after the most recent episode releases. It's not important to get into here. Hop on the guild and subscribe and jump in there and do stuff. Speaking of which, Sean, I haven't been paying attention. Are we at BGG Golden Geeks time?
Oh, goodness. I don't know, but let's figure that out soon. I haven't seen anything.
If the Golden Geeks are open and there's a chance to nominate a podcast, hopefully you'll nominate this one. But there's a chance we've already missed the window or we're too early.
I think we're too early. I haven't seen anything.
Okay, phew.
Yeah,
I haven't seen anything either.
But let's make sure we get on that this year.
We're in the range. We're still in the range of when this would be, a thing. But anyway. So yeah, that'll do it. I'll just about do it.
So Joshua, if people want to connect in you on any way, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on Twitter at Joshua Acosta MD. That's M as in like MD medical doctor. You could also find me on Board Game Geek at Joshua Acosta, and on basically any online board game playing platform as Joshua Acosta. Find me on like Spiel by Web. We can play some Bus. Yukata. We can play some Snowdonia I talked about.
Cool. You know what I'm just realizing, Alex?
What's that?
You're the only non-doctor on this podcast right now.
Oh, because you're a Juris Doctor?
Yeah.
Get over yourself.
It counts.
It does not count.
I save lives in different ways, Alex.
you save people from legal troubles.
Yeah, in different ways.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, technically, I still have 3 more months to go. So
that's close enough. Yeah. It's close enough, Doctor.
Well, yeah. Anyway, Joshua, thank you so much for joining us. I'm glad we could finally make this happen.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, well, that's going to do it then for episode 220. Thanks again to Baker Mitchell for Trains, Pains, and Moral Stains. Until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
And Joshua.
And Duke you later, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on February 27th, 2020. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesOfDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Game Toppers LLC and Arcane Wonders. You can learn more about Game Toppers at GameToppersLLC.com and find out all you need to know about Arcane Wonders at ArcaneWonders.com. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on.